September is almost here, and if you have any of these 5 perennials growing in your yard right now, you may have only a very short window to take action before a problem that seems small today becomes a major headache next spring. I'm not talking about next weekend, and I am definitely not talking about when I get around to it. I mean now, because after September 1st, some pests and diseases will have already entered the next stage of their biological cycle, and once that happens, you are no longer preventing the problem. You are trying to clean up the damage it has already created. After more than 25 years of growing and managing perennial gardens, one of the most expensive mistakes I see gardeners make every fall is leaving everything standing too long. They think they are helping the plants. They think the birds need the seed heads. They think another week or 2 cannot possibly matter. But with these 5 specific perennials, that extra time can be exactly what pests and pathogens need to survive the winter and return even stronger in spring. Late August is not simply the end of summer. It is one of the most important periods of the entire gardening year. So today I'm going to show you 5 perennials that deserve special attention before September 1st, explain what is happening biologically right now, and tell you exactly how far back to cut them. And make sure you stay through the end, because the sanitation mistakes in the final section can completely undo all the work you do in the garden. Let us start with number 1. Bearded iris, Iris times germanica. If you grow bearded iris such as Immortality, Dusky Challenger, Beverly Sills, Clarence, or Happy Returns, late August is an important time to clean up the foliage. The reason is a pest called the iris borer, Macronaccio onusta. The adult moth becomes active in late summer and searches for dead, dry, folded iris foliage around the base of the plant. That material gives the moth a place to lay its eggs. The eggs are tiny, easy to miss, and capable of surviving the winter. When they hatch in spring, the young caterpillars tunnel into the leaves and move downward toward the rhizomes. That creates 2 serious problems. First, the tunneling damages the plant's photosynthetic tissue and reduces its ability to store energy for future growth. But the second problem is even more dangerous. Those wounds can provide an entry point for bacterial soft rot. The rhizome can eventually become soft, foul-smelling, and severely damaged. Once advanced bacterial soft rot has destroyed the tissue, no spray can simply bring that rhizome back. That is why prevention matters. Before September 1st, cut the iris foliage back into a fan approximately 4 to 6 inches above the soil line. Use clean, sharp shears and make an angled cut rather than leaving a flat horizontal surface where moisture can sit. Then remove every piece of trimmed foliage from the bed. Do not leave it around the rhizomes, because the goal is to remove the potential egg-laying material. Bearded iris is generally hardy across zones 3 through 9, so this advice applies across a large part of the country, although local weather and plant condition can change the exact timing. And if you have repeatedly blamed poor drainage or soil problems for iris soft rot, remember that borer damage can be an important part of that disease cycle. Remove the borer's potential habitat, and you may reduce 2 problems with 1 simple pruning session. Now let us move to number 2, Bee Balm, Monarda didyma. Bee Balm can produce spectacular midsummer color, but by late August many stands look completely exhausted. The leaves become yellow, curled, and covered with a white powdery coating. Many gardeners simply accept this as the normal end of the season. But that white coating represents active powdery mildew, and late summer is an important period in its reproductive cycle. Throughout the growing season, mildew produces spores that spread across the plant. As conditions change toward the end of summer, the fungus can form protective overwintering structures known as chasmathecia. These structures can survive unfavorable conditions and contribute to infection when new growth appears the following spring. That means the diseased foliage you leave standing today can become part of tomorrow's disease problem. If your bee balm is heavily infected, cut the entire stand down close to the soil surface, leaving roughly 1 to 2 inches. If infection is lighter, you can leave slightly more stem, but the key is removing the heavily infected canopy. Then remove the cut material from the garden. Do not simply pile it around the crown. Cultivars such as Jacob Klein, Marshall's Delight, Balmy Purple, Balmy Rose, and Raspberry Wine can all benefit from proper late-season cleanup. Bee Balm is generally hardy across zones 3 through 9, There is another important lesson here. Bee Balm's dense growth habit can trap humid air between stems, which makes mildew easier to establish. If this disease returns every year, consider dividing overcrowded clumps and giving the new divisions more space for airflow. You do not always need another bottle of fungicide. Sometimes what your plant needs most is sunlight, airflow, sanitation, and correct timing. We are moving to number 3, Garden Phlox, Phlox paniculata. Garden Phlox is one of the most beloved midsummer perennials in American gardens. Cultivars such as David, Robert Poor, Gina, and selection from the luminary and opening act lines have been bred for improved disease resistance. But even resistant varieties are not completely immune to late summer pest and disease pressure. One problem is the phlox plant bug, Lopidia divisi. It is small, fast-moving, and easy to miss because it scatters when you approach the plant. It feeds by inserting its mouth parts into the leaf tissue, and the damage can appear as pale stippling, yellowing, curling, and browning. Another major problem is the two-spotted spider mite, Tetranicus urticae. Hot, dry August weather can cause spider mite populations to increase rapidly. They feed primarily on the undersides of leaves and create the familiar stippled or bronzed appearance. Heavy infestations may also produce fine webbing between leaves and stems. If you can already see webbing, the population is likely significant. But here is the part many gardeners miss. Leaving heavily infested phlox standing through fall does not simply allow this year's pest to finish feeding. Plant bugs can overwinter around plant material. Spider mites can survive in protected debris and soil cracks, and powdery mildew can leave behind overwintering structures on infected foliage. A dense, diseased phlox canopy essentially creates a protected shelter where multiple problems can survive. That is why, especially when the plant is heavily infected, cutting it back before September 1st can be valuable. Bring the stems down to approximately 2 to 3 inches above the soil surface. Removing the dense canopy exposes the crown and surrounding soil to sunlight, air movement, drying, and temperature changes. You're not merely removing ugly foliage. You're changing the environment that pests and pathogens depend on. Garden phlox generally grows across zones 3 through 8, and gardeners in humid regions should be especially alert to powdery mildew. If more than half the foliage is covered with heavy mildew, do not keep waiting for the plant to collapse on its own. Cut it back, remove the debris, and reduce the amount of infected material remaining around the crown. Now we come to number 4, and this one is different because the damage can be happening inside the leaves while the pest is almost impossible to see. Columbine, Aquilegia species and hybrids, can look beautiful in spring and almost hopeless by late summer. The leaves develop pale, winding, serpentine trails that look like someone drew lines through the foliage. Those lines are caused by leaf miner larvae feeding between the upper and lower surfaces of the leaf. The larvae tunnel through the mesophyll, the green tissue responsible for photosynthesis, leaving damaged areas behind. By August, a heavily infested plant may have a large portion of its foliage rendered ineffective. But the most important thing happening now is what those larvae are preparing to do next. As they mature, they can leave the leaves, drop to the soil, and pupate in the upper soil layer or surrounding debris. That is how the next generation survives until spring. Then the adults emerge and begin laying eggs on fresh, new columbine leaves, starting the cycle again. This is why late August pruning is so useful. Cut the foliage back to the basal crown, leaving approximately 1 to 2 inches of stem, and remove the infested leaves from the garden. Every infested leaf you remove before the larvae complete their transition is one less opportunity for that generation to reach the soil and continue the cycle. And here is the surprising part. Columbine often responds beautifully. Within several weeks, the plant can produce a fresh flush of basal foliage. It will not look like the tall flowering plant you saw in spring, but it can become a clean, compact mound that carries the garden through fall before dormancy. That fresh growth can also continue photosynthesizing and storing energy for next season. There's another reason to cut back columbine in late summer: seed control. Columbine is an enthusiastic self-seeder. If you allow every remaining seed pod to mature and split, you may end up with dozens of volunteer seedlings in places you never intended. Some gardeners love that natural spread. Others spend the next 2 years pulling unwanted plants. Cutting before the remaining pods shatter gives you control over where future columbines grow. Popular selections such as Macana Giant, Crimson Star, Blue Barlow, Ruby Port, and Black Barlow offer a wide range of colors and forms and are generally suited to zones 3 through 9 depending on cultivar. And unlike many contact sprays, pruning has a major advantage against leaf miners. Once the larvae are safely inside the leaf, they're physically protected from many surface treatments. Timing the removal of the foliage can therefore be far more practical for a home gardener. Now we have covered 4 plants, but the 5th one is especially important because its late summer disease problem can affect not just the plant itself, but potentially nearby plants as well. And after that, I'm going to give you the 3 sanitation rules that can determine whether all this work actually pays off. That final section is where many gardeners unknowingly make their biggest mistake. We have reached number 5, and this plant is one of the most useful and reliable perennials in the garden. Hardy Geranium, geranium species and cultivars, also commonly called cranesbill geranium. Do not confuse it with tender pelargonium, the plants many people casually call geraniums. Hardy geraniums such as Roseanne, Johnson's Blue, Biacovo, Max Free, and Geranium sanguineum selections can be remarkably durable, but after a full season of growth, especially in large sprawling cultivars, the plant can turn into a tangled mound. The center opens up, stems collapse over one another, airflow decreases, moisture becomes trapped, and the inner foliage becomes an ideal environment for disease. Powdery mildew can develop, while rust caused by Puccinia species can create orange, brown, or rust-colored pustules, particularly on the undersides of leaves. During wet summers, the center of a large clump can even become a matted mass of decaying foliage. If you leave that infected material standing through fall and winter, you are leaving pathogen material directly around the crown where next year's new growth will emerge. Rust spores can survive on infected plant material, and mildew can produce overwintering structures on diseased foliage. So the cut here is simple. Bring the plant down to approximately 2 inches above the soil surface using clean, sharp shears. Remove the tired, sprawling, infected material and collect everything. Do not leave the debris around the plant. Hardy geraniums can surprise you with how quickly they recover. Vigorous cultivars such as Roseanne can produce a fresh, compact flush of basal foliage within a few weeks. Instead of entering fall with a collapsed, diseased mound, the plant can move toward dormancy from a cleaner and healthier state. If your geranium has been in the same location for 4 or 5 years and the center is losing vigor, this is also a good opportunity to evaluate whether the clump needs dividing. Hardy geraniums generally divide well, and an established clump can often be separated into multiple healthy divisions that you can replant elsewhere. Now, before you finish pruning any of these 5 plants, there are 3 sanitation rules you absolutely need to remember. Rule number 1. Disinfect your shears between plants. This is incredibly important. Imagine cutting a heavily mildew-covered Bee Balm and then walking directly over to your phlox with the same dirty blades. You may physically transfer contaminated material from one plant to another. You have just created a new route for disease to spread. Keep 70% isopropyl alcohol with you and disinfect the blades between plants. If you use a diluted bleach solution instead, remember that bleach can corrode metal, so rinse and dry your shears afterward and protect the blades before storage. Rule number 2. Do not casually compost heavily diseased plant material. This includes mildew-covered Bee Balm, heavily infected phlox foliage, leaf miner-infested columbine leaves, iris debris that may harbor pests, and rust-infected geranium foliage. Home compost piles do not always heat uniformly enough to guarantee that every pathogen, insect egg, or larva has been destroyed. If you are dealing with heavily diseased material, bag it securely and dispose of it according to your local waste regulations, rather than returning the problem to your garden as compost. Rule number 3. Turn this into an annual calendar event. Do not wait until the garden looks terrible and then wonder what happened. These pests and pathogens follow biological schedules. The iris borer has a seasonal reproductive cycle. Powdery mildew forms overwintering structures. Leaf miners move toward pupation. Rust produces spores. Your garden management should follow those cycles. Put August 15th on your calendar every year as the beginning of your late summer perennial inspection. From August 15th towards September 1st, walk through your garden and identify these 5 plants before the critical window passes. Now let us make the entire process incredibly simple. Bearded iris. Cut the foliage into a 4 to 6 inch fan with an angled cut and remove the old debris. Your goal is to reduce iris borer egg-laying habitat and lower the risk of borer-related wounds contributing to bacterial soft rot. Bee Balm. If heavily infected, cut it to approximately 1 to 2 inches above the soil and remove the disease canopy to reduce the amount of powdery mildew material remaining in the bed. Garden Phlox. Cut to approximately 2 to 3 inches when the stand is heavily diseased or infested, removing the dense canopy that shelters pests and pathogens. Columbine. Cut to approximately 1 to 2 inches above the basal crown, removing leaf miner-infested foliage before larvae complete their transition to the soil, while also controlling unwanted seed production. Hardy Geranium. Cut to approximately 2 inches, removing sprawling and infected material and giving the plant an opportunity to produce cleaner basal growth before dormancy. And remember the most important numbers. Inspect between August 15th and September 1st, adjust for your local climate and plant condition, disinfect your tools between plants, and remove heavily diseased debris from the garden.